Before we unseal the files on this case and examine the footage that changed the course of intelligence history, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The stories from the Cold War are fading from living memory, and your support helps us keep these archives open. The story begins not in a shadowed alley in East Berlin or a briefing room at Langley, but in the brightly lit electronics department of a Sears Roebuck in Arlington, Virginia. The date was September 12, 1983. It was a Monday. The mood in the United States was brittle. The Soviet Union had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 only weeks prior, and the rhetoric between Washington and Moscow had reached a temperature not felt since the Cuban Missile Crisis. But for Arthur Vance, a 42-year-old mid-level logistics officer at the U.S. State Department, the primary concern of the day was the weight of the box in his hands. Vance had just purchased a state-of-the-art RCA camcorder, a bulky, shoulder-mounted device that recorded directly onto VHS tapes. It was an extravagance costing nearly a month's salary, but Vance was a man who believed in documentation. At the State Department, his job involved the tedious cataloging of diplomatic pouches entering and leaving the Warsaw Pact countries. He was a man of lists, of schedules, and of records. In his personal life, this manifested as a desire to capture the fleeting moments of his family's suburban existence. He wanted to freeze time. He had no idea that his new hobby would freeze a moment of treason that the FBI had spent 2 years trying to find. The Vance family lived in a cul-de-sac in McLean, Virginia, a neighborhood of manicured lawns and colonial-style homes that served as a bedroom community for the capital's bureaucratic class. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved but rarely spoke about their work. Security clearances were a common denominator. Discretion was the currency of social interaction. Living directly next door to the Vances, at number 4208, was the Thorne family. Elias Thorne was a quiet, amiable man in his late 40s who ran a boutique travel agency in Georgetown, specializing in corporate bookings for European travel. His wife, Martha, volunteered at the local library. They were the perfect neighbors. Their grass was always cut. They brought cookies during the holidays, and they never played loud music. Elias Thorne was known for his roses. He spent hours in his garden, tending to hybrid tea roses that were the envy of the block. On the afternoon Vance brought his new camera home, he immediately set it up in his living room. He filmed his wife, Sarah, rolling her eyes at the expense. He filmed his 10-year-old son, Timothy, doing homework. The footage, preserved today in the National Archives under a classified evidence number, is grainy and washed out, typical of early consumer video. It wobbles as Vance adjusts the focus. It captures the banality of American life in 1983. The wood-paneled station wagon in the driveway, the hum of the refrigerator, the evening news playing in the background discussing nuclear freeze movements. But Vance was eager to test the camera's outdoor capabilities. On Saturday, September 17th, the Vances hosted a neighborhood end-of-summer barbecue. It was a casual affair. Hot dogs, hamburgers, a keg of beer for the adults. The entire cul-de-sac was invited. Vance spent the majority of the afternoon with the heavy camera perched on his shoulder, filming his neighbors as they ate and laughed. He fancied himself a documentarian of the suburbs. He narrated as he filmed, making dad jokes, zooming in on people's startled expressions. At 3:14 p.m., according to the time estimation later reconstructed by counterintelligence analysts, Arthur Vance pointed his camera toward the edge of his property line, where the hedges separated his yard from the Thornes' garden. He was filming his son playing tag. In the background, out of focus, Elias Thorne was standing by his rose bushes. He wasn't alone. The camera panned past them quickly, lingering for less than 4 seconds before moving back to the children running in circles. Vance didn't notice anything unusual at the time. He was looking through the monochrome viewfinder, worried about battery life. He didn't know that he had just captured the only known image of a ghost, a Soviet handler known to Western intelligence only by the codename Vector. The barbecue ended. The guests went home. The autumn leaves began to fall, and the tape, labeled BBQ 83, Tim's Soccer, was placed in a plastic case and shoved to the back of a cabinet in the Vance living room. It would sit there, gathering dust, for 5 months. 5 months during which the man next door, the kindly travel agent with the prize-winning roses, continued to dismantle the security of the United States from his basement study. To understand why that 4-second clip was so catastrophic, one must understand the man Elias Thorn actually was. His real name was not Elias Thorn. He was born Nikolai Volkov in a grim industrial city in the Urals in 1939. His path to the manicured lawn in McLean had been a masterpiece of long-game intelligence work, a project the KGB referred to as the Deep Sleep. Volkov had entered the United States in 1964, not via a submarine or a parachute, but through Canada, assuming the identity of a deceased Canadian infant whose records had been destroyed in a church fire. He had lived a blameless life for nearly 20 years. He had built his cover layer by layer, paint coat by paint coat, until the Soviet citizen underneath was completely entombed. The travel agency was not just a front, it was a functioning business. It gave him legitimate reasons to communicate with Europe, to handle international telexes, to move money. His mission was not to steal bomb schematics or military movements. Those were the targets of military attachés and short-term spies. Thorn's directive was political intelligence and influence. He was an assessor. His job was to identify weakness in the Washington elite, gambling debts, marital strife, hidden addictions, and pass those profiles to Moscow for potential recruitment. He was a scout in the enemy camp, marking targets for others to hit. By 1983, Thorn was tired. The psychological toll of living a lie for 2 decades was beginning to fracture his composure. He had an American wife who knew nothing of his origins. He had an American daughter attending college in Ohio. He had developed a genuine affection for baseball and grilled meats. The lines between the cover and the man were blurring. The meeting in the garden on September 17th was a deviation from protocol. Standard operating procedure dictated that Thorn never meet a handler near his home. Dead drops were to be used, a hollow rock in Rock Creek Park, a magnetic container under a mailbox in Bethesda. But there had been an emergency. A high-ranking Soviet defector in London had provided a list of mole hunters working within the KGB, and Moscow needed to know if the CIA was acting on that information. The urgency overrode the safety protocols. The handler, Vector, had posed as a landscape architect giving a quote on tree removal. It was a flimsy cover, but it needed to hold for only 10 minutes. They stood by the roses. They spoke in rapid, hushed Russian, their bodies angled away from the main party next door. "The center is blind," Vector had said, according to later interrogations. "We need to know who is whispering in London." Thorn had replied, "I can't get that. I'm not in the agency. I'm a travel agent." "You have clients," Vector pressed. "You have the senator's aide. You have the colonel from the Pentagon who books his mistress's flights through you. Squeeze them." Thorn had looked toward the Vance's yard, hearing the laughter of children. He saw Arthur Vance with the camera on his shoulder. "He's filming," Thorn whispered, his body going rigid. Vector didn't flinch. "He is filming his fat child. He is not looking at us. Act natural. Point at the tree." Thorn pointed at the oak tree. Vector nodded, feigning professional interest in a dying branch. The camera panned away. The moment passed, or so they thought. In the months that followed, Thorn felt a crawling sensation on the back of his neck. He became paranoid. He stopped using the telephone for anything other than mundane business. He began taking erratic routes to work, doubling back on the Beltway, stopping suddenly on off-ramps to see if anyone followed. He saw nothing. The FBI surveillance teams of 1983 were not the ghosts of the movies. They were overworked men in sedans, but they weren't watching him. Not yet. The irony of the Cold War espionage game was that the greatest threats often went unnoticed because they were too boring to investigate. Thorn was boring. He paid his taxes. He drove a Buick. He was invisible because he was identical to everyone around him. It would take a distinct anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of suburbia, to render him visible. It was February 1984. A heavy snowstorm had shut down Washington, D.C., closing schools and government offices. Arthur Vance was home, bored, and trapped indoors with a restless 10-year-old. The novelty of the RCA camcorder had worn off slightly, but the boredom of a snow day revived it. "Let's watch the movies we made," Timothy suggested. Vance dug out the plastic case from the cabinet. He connected the camera to the television using the RF adapter. a tangle of wires that required patience to set up. They sat on the beige carpet, eating popcorn, watching their life played back to them in low fidelity. They watched the Christmas morning footage. They watched a school play where Timothy forgot his lines. And then the tape rewound to the beginning, to the barbecue in September. Vance watched with a nostalgic smile. The green grass, the sunshine. It felt distant in the gray light of February. He watched his friend Bob struggle with a folding chair. He watched his wife laughing with a glass of wine. Then the camera panned to the edge of the yard. "Wait," Vance said. "Who was that with Elias?" He hadn't meant to ask it aloud. It was just a stray thought. He hit the pause button on the VCR. The image jittered, lines of static cutting across the screen. The pause function on 1983 VCRs was not clean. It was a vibrating mess of noise. Vance squinted. He saw Elias Thorne, the travel agent. And he saw a man in a dark windbreaker and a flat cap. The man was pointing at the tree, but he wasn't looking at the tree. He was looking at Elias with an intensity that didn't fit a casual conversation about gardening. And Elias looked terrified. Vance hit play, then rewind, then play again. He watched the 4 seconds in a loop. Pan left. Elias and the stranger. Pan right. Kids running. There was something about the body language. Vance worked in logistics, but he worked for the State Department. He had sat through mandatory security briefings every year for 15 years. They taught you to look for non-congruent behavior. The stranger handed something to Elias. It was fast. A blink and you'd miss it. It looked like a folded newspaper or a brochure. But the way Elias took it, he didn't take it by the edge. He palmed it. He slid it immediately into the pocket of his cardigan, a motion that was smooth, practiced, and furtive. Vance stood up and walked to the television, his nose inches from the static-filled glass. "Dad, you're blocking the screen," Timothy complained. "Quiet, Tim." Vance watched it again. The stranger's face was partially obscured by the cap, but for a split second, as the camera moved away, the stranger looked directly into the lens. The look wasn't one of a gardener caught slacking off. It was a look of cold, predatory calculation. And then Vance recognized him. Not the name, but the face. 3 weeks prior, a security bulletin had been circulated at the State Department. It was a lookout list. Grainy photos of known foreign intelligence officers suspected of operating in the DC area under unofficial cover. Most employees glanced at it and threw it in the shredder. Vance, being a man of lists, had actually read it. There was a man on that list, a suspected KGB line officer who had been spotted meeting with radicals in West Germany before surfacing in Canada. The photo in the bulletin was blurry, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. But the man had a distinctive scar on his chin, visible even in the grain. Vance pressed his face to the TV. The static jumped. The image wavered. There, on the stranger in his backyard, was a shadow on the chin. Vance felt a sudden drop in his stomach, a sensation like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. He wasn't looking at a gardener. He was looking at a meeting that never should have happened, filmed by a camera that wasn't supposed to be there. Arthur Vance did not sleep that night. The videotape sat on top of the VCR like a loaded weapon. He paced the living room, looking out the window at the Thornes house across the dark, snowy gap between their properties. The house was dark, save for a single light in the basement. Elias was awake. Vance debated his options. If he was wrong, he would be the laughingstock of the office, the paranoid suburbanite who watched too many spy movies. He could destroy his relationship with his neighbors. He could ruin Elias's reputation. But if he was right? The next morning, the roads were still icy, but the government was open on a 2-hour delay. Vance wrapped the VHS tape in a plastic bag and placed it in his briefcase. He didn't take it to his direct supervisor. He didn't trust the logistics chain with this. He went to the Diplomatic Security Service, DSS office on the 4th floor. He asked to speak to an agent named Miller, a man he had played softball with on the departmental league. Miller was a serious man with a mustache that violated several fashion laws, but he was competent. "Arthur, what can I do for you?" "Lost a pouch?" Miller asked, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. "I need you to watch something," Vance said. And I need you to promise me you won't laugh." They went into a small viewing room. Vance loaded the tape. He fast-forwarded through the Christmas presents and the soccer game, stopping at the barbecue. "Watch the edge of the frame," Vance said. He played the clip, then he rewound and played it again. Miller watched in silence. He leaned forward. "Play it again." Vance played it a third time. "That's Elias Thorne," Vance said. "My neighbor. Runs a travel agency." "And the other guy?" Miller asked. I think it's the guy from the Lookout Circular. The one from the January 12th memo. The illegal from Toronto." Miller froze. He looked at Vance, then back at the screen. He picked up a phone on the wall. "Get me the unexpected visitor file," Miller said into the receiver, "and bring the magnifying loupe." For the next hour, 3 agents huddled around the monitor. They went frame by frame. They argued about pixels and lighting. But when they pulled the file photo of the suspect, a man identified by the CIA as Victor Kogan, a KGB officer specializing in deep cover support, the room went quiet. The hairline matched. The ear shape matched. And the handoff, the way Thorne palmed the document, was textbook tradecraft. It was a brush pass, executed in a semi-private environment. Miller turned to Vance. The friendly softball demeanor was gone. "Arthur, you need to listen to me very carefully. You are going to go back to your desk. You are going to do your work. You are going to go home at 5:30 exactly. You are going to wave to Mr. Thorne if you see him. You are going to talk about the snow. You are not to tell your wife. You are not to tell your son. This tape never existed. Do you understand?" "Is it him?" Vance asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We're keeping the tape, Arthur," was all Miller said. Vance walked back to his office, his legs feeling like lead. He sat at his desk and stared at a manifest of diplomatic cargo for Jakarta, but the numbers swam before his eyes. He had pulled a thread, and he could feel the entire fabric of his neighborhood beginning to unravel. The case was kicked up the chain of command with terrifying speed. By noon, the FBI had been notified. Jurisdiction in counterintelligence cases on domestic soil belonged to the Bureau, but because the source was a State Department employee, a joint task force was established. They called it Operation Glasshouse. The premise was simple. If Elias Thorne was meeting with a known KGB handler in his own backyard, he wasn't just a sympathizer. He was a deep cover asset of significant value. Handlers like Kogan didn't make house calls for low-level informants. Special Agent David Harrows of the FBI Washington Field Office took the lead. Harrows was a veteran of the counterintelligence wars, a man who wore gray suits and smoked ceaselessly. He viewed the Vance tape not as a victory, but as a failure of his division. A Soviet illegal had been living in McLean for almost 2 decades, and it took a dad with a camcorder to find him. "We don't touch him yet," Harrows told the team in the secure conference room. "We don't know who he is, really. We don't know who he knows. We don't know his network. If we arrest him today, we get 1 man. If we watch him, we might get the whole cell." The surveillance net that descended on 428 Willow Creek Drive was absolute and invisible. The FBI rented the house 2 doors down, which had been on the market for months. They moved in a young couple, 2 agents who spent their days monitoring audio bugs that were drilled through the foundation walls during a staged utility repair. They tapped the phone lines at the street level. They intercepted Thorne's mail, steaming open envelopes at the post office facility before resealing them and sending them on for delivery. They installed a camera in a birdhouse in the young couple's tree, pointed directly at Thorne's front door. But the most crucial piece of surveillance was Arthur Vance. Vance was brought to a safe house in Alexandria 3 days after he turned in the tape. Agent Harrows sat across from him. "Mr. Vance, your neighbor is a person of interest," Harrows said, understating the situation massively. "We need you to continue your normal routine, but we also need you to be our eyes on the ground." "You want me to spy on him?" Vance asked. "I want you to be a neighbor," Harrows corrected. "If he mentions travel, remember it. If he mentions money, remember it. If he seems stressed, agitated, or overly happy, note it down. Do not ask questions. Do not pry. Just listen." Vance returned to the cul-de-sac carrying a secret that felt physically heavy in his chest. That evening, he shoveled his driveway. Elias Thorne was out as well, chipping ice off his windshield. "Heavy stuff, huh, Arthur?" Thorne called out, his breath pluming in the cold air. Vance gripped his shovel. He looked at the man he had known for 5 years. The man who had helped him jumpstart his car. The man who Kogan, the KGB agent, had visited. "Yeah, Elias," Vance said, forcing a smile that felt like a rictus mask. "My back is going to feel this tomorrow." "You should get a snowblower," Thorne advised, leaning on his car. "Best investment I ever made." "Maybe next year," Vance said. Thorne nodded and went back to scraping. Vance watched him for a second too long before turning away. The banality of evil wasn't grand. It was a conversation about snowblowers with a man who was betraying the country. The investigation into Elias Thorne's travel agency, Thorne and Associates, revealed the mechanism of his espionage. It was elegant in its simplicity. The agency did legitimate business. It booked flights for corporations, arranged hotels for trade delegations. But the FBI forensic accountants, working through the night on subpoenaed bank records obtained under FISA warrants, found the anomalies. Thorne was overcharging specific clients for complex itineraries. A flight to Frankfurt would be invoiced at 20% above market rate. The client, usually a shell company connected to other known fronts in Europe, would pay without complaint. The excess money was then siphoned off into accounts in the Cayman Islands and Liechtenstein. But the money was secondary. The agency was an information hub. Thorne was using the telex machine, the standard communication tool of the travel industry, to send coded messages. He would send itineraries for passengers who didn't exist. "Passenger Mr. Green requires vegetarian meal on Flight 882 to Zurich. Confirm hotel reservation at Hotel Eden, room facing east." Cryptanalysts at the NSA broke the code within weeks. Mr. Green was a signifier for a specific type of political intelligence. Flight 882 corresponded to a page number in a book code. Room facing east indicated the urgency. Thorne was transmitting summaries of conversations he had overheard or solicited from his high-level clients. He was reporting on the mental state of State Department officials, the drinking habits of Senate aides, the financial troubles of Pentagon contractors. He was the spider in a web of social engineering. And there was something else. The travel documents Kogan had handed him in the video. The FBI suspected they were escape plans. By May 1984, the picture was clear. Thorne was feeling the heat. The intercepted telexes were becoming more frantic. He was asking for an extraction route. He was liquidating assets. He was preparing to run. Harrows knew they were running out of time. They had identified 3 other people Thorne was communicating with: a professor at Georgetown University, a clerk at the Naval Shipyard, and a secretary at the Department of Energy. They had the network. Now they needed the confession. But they needed Thorne to make one mistake. They needed to catch him with the smoking gun, physical possession of classified documents. The hearsay and the telexes were strong, but in a federal court, they needed the hard evidence to ensure a life sentence. They needed Arthur Vance to invite him to dinner. The request from the FBI was simple and terrifying. Vance was to host a small dinner party, just the Vances and the Thornes. The objective was to get Elias out of his house for 3 hours so the FBI black bag team could enter 4208 Willow Creek Drive and plant a video camera in Thorne's study. Vance argued against it. "I can't sit there and eat pot roast with him knowing what I know. I'll sweat, I'll stutter." "You'll do fine," Harrows assured him. "Talk about the camera. He knows you love that camera. Show him some tapes, bore him to death." The dinner was set for Saturday, June 9th, 1984. The evening was humid. The cicadas were screaming in the trees. Elias and Martha Thorne arrived at 7 p.m. with a bottle of Merlot. Martha was cheerful, talking about her library fundraisers. Elias looked tired, the skin under his eyes dark and papery. Vance's wife, Sarah, who had finally been briefed on a need-to-know basis and was terrified, played the hostess perfectly. She kept the wine glasses full. She steered the conversation to safe topics: the local school board elections, the price of gasoline. Vance felt like he was underwater. Every sound was distorted. He watched Elias cut his roast beef. He watched the hands that had taken the package from the KGB agent. They were manicured, steady hands. "So, Arthur," Elias said, wiping his mouth, Still filming everything, or has the novelty worn off? Vance's heart hammered against his ribs. Oh, I'm still at it. Actually, I wanted to show you some footage from the lake trip we took last month. I'd love to see it, Elias said, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of boredom. While they moved to the living room across the hedge, 3 FBI agents clad in black were picking the lock on Thorne's back door. They moved with silent precision. They knew the layout of the house from blueprints obtained from the county clerk. They knew the dog, a golden retriever named Buster, had been sedated with a drugged piece of meat thrown over the fence an hour earlier. Inside the Vance living room, Arthur played the tapes. He kept up a nervous commentary. Elias watched politely, occasionally checking his watch. It's getting late, Martha Thorne said around 9:30 p.m. We should let these good people rest. One more clip, Vance insisted, desperate to buy the team next door more time. He hadn't received the signal yet. A single ring on the telephone. Arthur, really? Sarah said, her voice tight. The phone rang. Once, then silence. Must be a wrong number, Vance said, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for 3 hours. Well, I guess you're right. It is late. As the Thornes walked back to their house, Elias paused on the sidewalk. He looked up at the sky, then back at his own front door. He hesitated. Everything okay, Elias? Vance called from his porch. Thorne turned back, his face unreadable in the yellow bug light. Just forgot to leave the porch light on. Getting forgetful in my old age, Arthur. He walked inside. He didn't know that a fiber optic lens was now concealed in the spine of the encyclopedia on the bookshelf behind his desk. The end came in August. The camera in the study had paid off. It captured Thorne photographing documents brought to him by the secretary from the Department of Energy, documents related to nuclear fuel enrichment. But it also captured something more personal. On the morning of August 14th, the camera recorded Thorne writing a letter. He wasn't using code. He was writing in English. He placed it in an envelope marked Martha. Then he opened his safe, took out a stack of cash, a passport with a different name, and a small pistol. He was leaving. Tonight. Agent Harrows made the call. We take him now, before he gets in the car. If he gets to the airport, we might lose him in the shuffle. The arrest was not dynamic. There were no helicopters. At 2:00 p.m., Elias Thorne was in his garden, deadheading his roses. He was wearing gardening gloves and a straw hat. 4 unmarked cars pulled into the cul-de-sac. They didn't use sirens. 8 agents in FBI windbreakers stepped out. They moved quickly up the driveway. Arthur Vance was watching from his living room window. He had been warned to keep his family inside. Thorne heard the car doors close. He turned. He saw Harrows walking toward him across the lawn. He didn't run. He didn't reach for the trowel or the shears. He simply took off his hat and sighed. It was a sigh that seemed to expel 20 years of air. Mr. Thorne, Harrows said, stopping 10 feet away. FBI, put your hands where I can see them. Thorne dropped the hat. He looked at the rosebush he had been pruning. It's black spot, he said, gesturing to the leaves. If you don't treat it, it spreads to the whole garden. Hands, Elias, Harrows said firmly. Thorne raised his hands. Is Martha home? She's at the library. We have agents picking her up now. Thorne nodded. Don't scare her. She doesn't know. She really doesn't know. As they handcuffed him, Thorne looked over the hedge. He saw Vance in the window. Their eyes locked across the distance of the yard, the distance of the lie. Thorne didn't look angry. He looked resigned. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging that the game was over. Then he was led to the car, his head pushed down to clear the doorframe, and driven away. The neighborhood did not recover quickly. The news vans arrived within the hour. Soviet spy ring in McLean was the headline. The idyllic cul-de-sac became a circus. The FBI spent 3 days searching the Thorne house. They tore up the floorboards. They dug up the rose garden, searching for buried caches. They found them. Canisters of film, gold coins, encryption pads buried beneath the roots of the prize-winning hybrid teas. Martha Thorne was released after 48 hours of intense interrogation. The FBI concluded she was a useful idiot, a spouse who had been so thoroughly deceived that her ignorance was her defense. She returned to the house only once to pack her clothes. She moved to Ohio to live with her daughter. She never spoke to the press. Arthur Vance became a minor celebrity at the State Department, a man who had caught a spy with a home movie. But he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like he had violated a social contract. He had invited a man to dinner to betray him. He knew it was necessary. He knew it was right. But it left a bitter taste. He never used the RCA camcorder again. He put it in a box in the attic. Elias Thorne, or Nikolai Volkov, never went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the brush pass, the recordings from the study, the financial records. It was an open and shut case of espionage under the Rosenberg statutes. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage in exchange for a life sentence without parole, sparing him the potential of the death penalty. He was debriefed for months. He gave up the names of his handlers, the locations of dead drops, the methods of his communication. He was a professional to the end. Once he was caught, he minimized his losses. He served his time at the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, Colorado. He was a model prisoner. He worked in the prison library. In 1996, 5 years after the Soviet Union collapsed, Arthur Vance received a letter. It had been forwarded through the Bureau of Prisons. It was from Volkov. "Dear Arthur, I hear the roses at 4208 are dead. The new owners paved over the garden. That is a pity. I do not blame you for the camera. We are watched by many things in this life. God, the state, our conscience. It was just bad luck that I was watched by an RCA. I hope Timothy is well. He was a good boy. He had a strong leg for soccer. Regrets are useless things here, but I do regret that I never finished pruning the hybrid teas before I left. They require attention in late August. Sincerely, N.V. Vance read the letter standing in his kitchen. He was retired now. The Cold War was history. The fear of nuclear annihilation had been replaced by new, more complex fears. He walked to the attic. He dug through the boxes until he found the plastic case. BBQ 83. He didn't own a VCR anymore that could play it, but he held the tape in his hand. It was just a piece of magnetic strip in a plastic shell, but inside it was a ghost. A moment where the mask slipped. A reminder that even in the most boring, safe corners of the world, there were secrets living next door. The story of Elias Thorne and Arthur Vance is a testament to the fragile nature of privacy in the modern age. It was the beginning of the era of surveillance, not by the state, but by ourselves. We document our lives to remember them, but sometimes we capture things we were never meant to see. Thorne died in prison in 2008. Vance passed away in 2014. The house at 4208 Willow Creek Drive still stands, though it has been remodeled. The basement where the telex machine hummed is now a home theater. The garden is a patio, but in the archives of the FBI, the tape remains. A grainy, wobbling testament to the day the Cold War came to a backyard barbecue and was caught on tape.